One day while exploring New Atlantis, we stumble into the Viewport, the local watering hole just outside the spaceport. Sitting on a bench inside is Marika Boros.
Hey there! You look like the planet-hopping type. Got any room on your ship for someone like me?
Well, that depends. Got any useful skills?
Plenty. I'm comfortable on a ship, especially in the gunner seat. I'm also a trained expert with shotguns. I have the certification to prove it.
Now, according to this little overlay here, Marika Boros has the Shotgun Certification perk, the Ballistics perk, and the Particle Beam Weapon Systems perk. Now, companion perks are complicated, and from what I can gather, they're pretty glitchy in their current state. In fact, a topic discussing how complicated they are really deserves its own video. But from what I gather, if we take her on as a crew member, we don't actually get any benefit from her shotgun certification or ballistics perks. Those perks are unique to her as a person. So in combat, when wielding a shotgun or using ballistic ammunition, she'll do more damage. But if we take her on as a companion, we don't do more damage with a shotgun, and neither will any of our ballistic damage improve from having her around. However, we should be able to get benefit from her Particle Beam Weapons System perk. In theory, by having her join our crew, our Particle Beam weapons will do more damage. However, it and many other crew member perks appear to not work at all. We'll talk about one of her perks as a demonstration. I currently have her assigned to my ship, the Kepler R, and we can see that my particle beam weapons are 49 and 79. If we go to the crew and unassign her, then go back, we see that nothing has changed. It is still 49 and 79. We know, however, that we are looking at the right thing. If we go into our perks and put a point into particle beam weapon systems, then check the Kepler R, we now see the damage has increased to 54 and 87. Some people theorize that crew member perks don't work unless we first have the perk, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Now that we have the Particle Beam Weapons System perk, if we go back to the crew and assign Marika to the Kepler, it still says 5487. I'm not sure if all crew perks are glitched like this, but many of them are. So instead of focusing on her perks, we're gonna focus on her character, on her story, find out who she is, where she came from, and what she can tell us about the settled systems. But before we can do that, we need to convince her to join our crew. If you're willing to work, you're welcome aboard.
Aye aye, Captain. I won't overcharge you. I'm grateful for the offer. I've been out of a job since I left the Freestar Rangers.
Now, we could pay 24,000 credits to get her to come with us, but at this point in my gameplay, I didn't even have that amount of money, and so we can resort to passing a persuasion check. I can't afford to pay what you're asking. Will you work for less?
You're short on credits?
I know you'd like to help me out if you could.
Yeah, I hope so.
That reminds me of a joke I heard the other day. ...
Okay, that's pretty good. Well, the last thing I want is you going bankrupt on my account. I'll work for whatever you can pay.
Oh, and she really liked that joke of mine. Well, having successfully talked her down, we can pay 12,000 credits to say, I like your attitude. You're hired.
Thanks! I think we'll make a great team, huh?
With that, she joins our crew, and we can assign her either to a ship or an outpost. Now, her perks clearly make her more valuable for a ship than an outpost, but again, the companion and crew perks in this game are a bit wonky, so at the moment, I really wouldn't pay much close attention to the perks when assigning a crew member, with a few exceptions. Marika here is not one of those exceptions, so we can place her anywhere, really. For the moment, we'll add her to our ship as a crewmate.
Thanks for giving me a chance, Captain. I won't let you down.
And then the next time we board the ship, we find her walking around. And when talking with her, we can hear her full story.
Do you need something, Captain?
Do you mind if I ask you some personal questions?
Sure, ask away.
Where are you from?
I was raised in Hopetown on Polvo. It's a corporate town run by Ron Hope, the CEO of Hope Tech Manufacturing. He likes to sell it as a utopia, a place where workers are provided everything they need for a happy life. But that's a lie. The conditions are awful for the average person in Hopetown. Almost everyone there lives hand to mouth.
This really didn't mean much to us at the very beginning of the game, but as we played the Freestar Collective plotline, we got to learn more about Ron Hope and Hopetown. We visited the place a number of times, and it seems that everyone around us, including our companions like Sam, had nothing but high praise for Ron Hope and what he did to Hopetown.
This was literally nothing until Ron Hope came here.
Ron Hope's the best thing that's happened to us.
We'd be dust, except for the factory.
But Marika here is giving us a very different perspective, and that perspective is going to come in handy when making decisions later in the Freestar Collective plotline, which I covered during my live streams. Why are the conditions there so bad?
It's Ron Hope's fault. He controls everything that happens in Hopetown. Our entire economy is dependent on him. There's nothing stopping him from increasing wages and improving safety in his factories, but he won't do it. Keeping your workforce poor and plying them with cheap liquor at company stores is a good way to keep them around.
What was it like growing up there?
I grew up on the edge of poverty, like most working-class people in Hopetown. My parents' wages from Hope Tech barely kept food on the table. For a long time, I couldn't imagine my life any other way. Ron Hope does a good job making sure his workers feel like they're being cared for. It wasn't until I got old enough to start working in the factories myself that I started to understand how bad things really were.
This is a surprising perspective for her to have because she's really the only person in the game who feels this way. While doing the Freestar Collective plotline, we learn some unsavory things about Ron Hope, but until that point, literally everyone in the game is just praising this guy, especially the people who live and work there. And unlike almost everywhere else, we don't find slums here. We find slums in Neon. We find slums at New Atlantis. We find slums at New Homestead. We find slums at Paradiso. We don't find slums at Hopetown. Nor indeed do we find any of these employee dwellings that she's talking about here. Can you tell me more about Hope Tech?
Hope Tech is a starship manufacturer. They make cargo freighters and other industrial vehicles. Most of them are clunky eyesores, barely suited for grav jumping. But people keep buying them, so Hope Tech keeps making them.
And this is actually a point of pride for the company. When walking around Hope Tech and talking to the employees who work there, and even when reading the marketing propaganda at Hope Tech, they definitely position themselves as the everyday workman's starship manufacturer.
Our motto is their trucks in space.
They're not there for style and comfort. They produce cheap, functional vehicles that are going to outlast all of the fancy starships. They're going to get you from point A to point B, and you're going to be able to haul as much cargo as you need. That's why people keep buying them, and there's definitely a place in the settled systems for such a starship manufacturer. Well, Marika, if things are that bad, I'm surprised more people don't leave.
I think more people would if they had the chance. But Hope Tech makes it almost impossible. They barely make enough to keep the lights on, let alone start a new life outside of Hopetown. That's why I joined the Freestar Rangers. I knew they'd fly me to Aquila for training, and I wanted to do something more meaningful with my life than building starships. I thought being a ranger would be a perfect fit. but it didn't turn out like I was expecting. Boarding the ship to leave Hopetown might be the best thing that happened to me while I was a deputy.
How was working with the Rangers different than you were expecting?
In the stories I heard growing up, the Rangers were always described as the ultimate champions of justice in the galaxy. But if you've spent any time in the Freestar Collective, it's obvious that they haven't even made a dent in the problems there. Just look at Neon. Poverty and crime are all over the city, but the Rangers barely bothered to patrol it. Learning that made me reconsider my opinion of them.
And she definitely has a point there. Our first interaction with the Freestar Rangers when arriving at Aquila City is finding them dealing with the Shaw Gang, a petty little criminal gang that had taken over a bank. They didn't even have a strong enough presence there to deal with it, which is why they worked with us. And as soon as they could, they recruited us as a ranger so that we could deal with the Shaw Gang problem. The Freestar Rangers are more concerned with the Ashta outside the city, a native bit of aggressive fauna, than they are with dealing with the Shaw Gang. And her point is very valid about Neon. Even when we talk with the Freestar Rangers there at Neon, they let us know that turning a blind eye to some of the minor crime that goes on in Neon is just part of the city's charm. It's how business is done there. We only find one Freestar Ranger stationed there. The gangs of Neon and Governor Bayou's personal security force have way more power and influence than the Freestar Rangers do. Well, sorry to hear that leaving Hopetown wasn't what you expected.
No apology needed, huh? It's not your fault. For all that working with the Rangers wasn't for me, I still learned a lot. It was eye-opening to see how people live all over the Freestar Collective. I thought the conditions in Hopetown were unique, but leaving Polvo showed me I was wrong about that.
How did leaving Polvo change your perspective on the Freestar Collective?
It showed me that Ron Hope's attitude isn't unique. The Freestar Collective is full of people willing to take advantage of others to get what they want. And there are barely any systems in place to stop them. No one to tell them no or punish them for it. That's the downside of the Freestar way of doing things, huh? No social safety nets. It's hard for anyone born into poverty to improve their situation, especially with people like Ron Hope and Benjamin Bayou in power.
Now we could, if we have the trait, pass a neon street rat check to say, I know exactly what you mean.
I'm sorry to hear that. Nobody deserves to be taken advantage of by the system. There has to be a better way of doing things.
Will you tell me more about why you decided to leave the Freestar Rangers?
The longer I spent with the Rangers, the more I started to feel like they serve the Freestar Collective's government more than its citizens. I couldn't make peace with the fact that an organization that claimed to stand for freedom and individuality let places like Hopetown exist. Eventually, the hypocrisy was too much. I made the decision to resign and move to the UC. It seemed like people there might share more of my views.
What made you think the UC would be any better?
There's a reason the United Colonies and the Freestar Collective have never quite seen eye to eye. They do things very differently. The UC provides services like healthcare and job placement for its citizens. Those kind of things don't exist in the Freestar Collective. My opinions about the government's responsibility to its citizens seem to fit better with the UC's way of doing things.
We could say that hypocrisy is taking it a bit far. I'm sure the Rangers do their best, or I think I would have made the same decision.
It was the right decision, but it wasn't an easy one. My family is still in Hopetown. that was almost enough to keep me from leaving the Freestar Collective. But I had my mind set on finding a better place for all of us. I've been trying to find my parents a way out of Hopetown for years. I thought if I moved to the UC and found out things were better there, they might finally be willing to consider it.
Did you find what you were looking for when you moved to the UC?
I thought I did at first. New Atlantis is clean and safe, and most of the people there are happy. And it seemed like the government was doing a lot to keep it that way. But my perspective changed after I took an entry-level job with UC Security. They stationed me in the well. I couldn't believe the conditions down there. It made all the UC talk of a perfect society seem like propaganda. The more I started looking around, the more cracks I saw in the whole thing.
What kind of things did you see in the well that changed your perspective?
The UC makes a show of promising job placement and housing options to all its citizens. But if those programs exist in the well, there's no sign of them. Most people down there live in the same conditions I saw in Hopetown. There's crime and unemployment, and a lack of good medical care. It's nothing like the rest of New Atlantis. But you'd never know that from the outside, of course.
Aside from the well, what else did you see that made you question the UC's intentions?
Their treatment of the soul system to begin with. It's one of humanity's greatest treasures, and they've let it fall into total disarray. The UC's insistence on maintaining a large and well-equipped military is also a bit off-putting. If they're committed to intergalactic peace, why do they need it? Those are the kinds of questions you almost never hear UC citizens ask. I think that comes down to good marketing on Mast's part.
It's a very naive point on Marika's part here, because how can you keep peace without a big military? And the more we've gotten to explore the settled systems and we've come upon the Crimson Fleet, the Ecliptic Mercenaries, the House Varun Zealots, not to mention all the corrupt corporations and spacers out there, we clearly see why the UC has a big military and why it's needed, and how that very military is what keeps the peace on New Atlantis. Just a weird point for her to have. Well, what good would it do the UC to lie to its citizens?
I think the UC government doesn't like people challenging its decisions or remembering its history in too much detail. Mast did some horrific things during the Colony War. They'd rather people forget about them, especially citizens who might start demanding a change. The best way to maintain the status quo is to keep people from examining things closely. Consistent propaganda is a good tool for that.
We could say I think you're reading too much into it, or I've never believed that things in the UC are as perfect as Mast would like us to think.
It all seems just a little bit too shiny when you really start to look closely, huh? I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks so. Once the wool fell from my eyes, living in New Atlantis lost its luster. That's when I decided life in the major factions wasn't for me. The problems run too deep. There's corruption and division everywhere, and not enough people are willing to see it. I don't think that will change anytime soon. It seems to me like the only option is starting over, huh? Founding a colony without the influence of massive governments and corporations. Maybe maybe people would be kinder to each other in a place like that.
Wow, Marika just wants to pull a Ulysses and begin again, doesn't she? Well, what makes you think that?
I've always tried to see the best in people. I really believe that the average person wants what's best for everyone around them. I think without the influence of big governments and greedy corporations, people will treat each other better.
Well, we could say what I think many of us are thinking right now, which is that sounds pretty idealistic. Or we could try to make her happy and say, maybe you should be the person to try it.
You read my mind, Captain. You're really getting to know me, huh? I've been thinking about the idea of founding my own settlement for a while. It isn't in my nature to sit around while the problems in the settled systems get worse. But I'm not rushing into anything. If I'm really going to do this, I need to get a better sense of how people live all over the settled systems. That means visiting the major cities and looking at both the good things and the bad. That way, I can decide what things I want to keep and what I am going to leave behind. Good thing I'm working for a captain that likes to travel, huh? We'll hit all the major cities in no time.
Sure, I think I can help you with that.
I appreciate it. And don't you worry, I won't let this distract me from my normal duties. You're still the boss.
Well, despite all that dialogue about her starting her own settlement, she doesn't come with any perks that are good for building a colony, and she doesn't come with a personal quest where we take her to all of the major settlements, she sees how they live, and she creates a list of things that she would like to keep and things that she would like to discard. We can turn her into a companion if we get rid of any existing companion and then send her to the ship. Once aboard the ship, we can talk to her and tell her that we want her to join us.
All right, let's get out of here.
She then joins us as a companion. And while a companion, I dragged her all over the settled systems. I spent over an hour going from major city to major city, just like she talked about. And unlike all of the Constellation companions, she had very little to say. After an hour of doing this, I only got her to say 2 things. Once at Neon.
There won't be any corporations the size of Xenofresh in my settlement.
And once at Hopetown.
He can almost smell the corruption in the air.
I went to Sidonia, New Atlantis, New Homestead, the Red Mile, the UC Vigilance, the Key, many other places, and that's all she said. That's all we get from Marika, and she comes across as a bit naive and hopelessly idealistic. A person with the best of intentions, but someone who doesn't understand human nature very well. Her observations about living in the Freestar Collective and the UC are unique and important. The Freestar Collective does emphasize personal independence a whole lot. The downside to that, of course, is not a lot of social safety nets. And within the Freestar Collective, we see a lot of corruption. Benjamin Bayou, of course, in Neon, who's one of the governors in charge of the Freestar Collective, keeps the city of Neon as sleazy as he possibly can, employing his own personal security, letting the gangs run amok as long as they remain useful to him. The Rangers aren't what they once were, and barely have enough members to keep Aquila City protected from the Ashta, let alone to keep the powerful corporations in line. Remember, Ryujin is also another powerful corporation that operates within Freestar Collective space, and they barely give the Freestar Rangers a second thought. They're pretty much free to do whatever they want. All they're concerned about is their company's perception, how the public sees them. And the United Colonies historically does have a reputation for war crimes with the Xeno Warfare program, but of course the Freestar Collective had their mech program as well, which was also banned after the Treaty of Narion. And her observations about the well are a bit pessimistic, and we meet many other characters who speak about the well as if it's this hidden shame. And yet my experiences with the well have been completely different. From what I've observed, the well appears to be the beating heart of New Atlantis. It's presented as a slum, but unlike what Marika says, there actually is a hospital there, Healthcare down here may not be as good as healthcare topside, but they do have it. There are plenty of shops in the well, many of which are thriving. The Trade Authority is free to operate there, sure, but it's pretty much free to operate everywhere. And as I said earlier, her criticisms of the military just boggle the mind. If there was ever a universe where at least one of these factions needed a strong, robust military to deal with the numerous threats out there, it would be this universe. We saw from our video on Ground Pounders that the Freestar Collective just didn't have the means to save their own colony. It was the UC Marines that landed to save a Freestar lab when it came under attack from spacers. I fail to see any reason to want to burn everything down and begin again. Now, Marika isn't suggesting what Ulysses did, that we nuke the Freestar Collective and the UC and build something from their ashes, but what I think she doesn't realize is that both of those societies were founded with similar intentions. Neither of those societies were founded with the idea that they were going to let corporations run amok, that they were going to keep people in poverty, that they were going to become an empire and conquer their neighbors. Those things evolve over time. And while Marika might attempt to found the perfect settlement, she will die. And her children, and her children's children, and their children might not share her same ideals. The perfect little settlement that she envisions, I think, is impossible to create in this universe, let alone any universe. But what are your thoughts on Marika and her opinions about the Freestar Collective and the United Colonies? Do you agree with her, or do you think that there's something to salvage from within both societies? Let me know in the comments below. I publish new Starfield episodes each and every week on my channel, so if you don't want to miss my next one, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. If you have already and you still feel like you're missing out on YouTube notifications, consider following me on Twitter at Oxhorn. I update Twitter manually with every new piece of content that I publish. I've got a merch shop with completely unique designs that you can't find anywhere else. My designs come on shirts in a variety of men's, women's, and children's sizes, and in a wide array of colors. You can find them on other products as well, like smartphone cases, pillows, posters, mugs, stickers, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in another way, consider becoming a patron on Patreon or a member here on YouTube. YouTube members get little badges that appear next to their names in the comment sections of my videos, and they gain access to ox emojis that they can use in my video comments and in the chats of my live streams. You can also consider giving me a super thanks on this video. Your super thanks directly contribute to the production of this series. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with more brand new videos.
I can't believe the news about Jasper Griggs.
The guy who started the Crimson Fleet? Wasn't the story that he disappeared chasing some fortune or something?
I can't believe